Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the Discourse. My name is MC Chasey Trapman, and I will be your mic controller on this episode of, well, again, the Discourse. Damn it! I always fuck this up.
It's because you're a piece of shit.
I don't know. It's hard. It's hard to come up with a good intro. I think "thank you for joining Discourse" sounds great. I think it, but I can never sort of like just springboard off of that into something good. It's always just like some bullshit. I can't. Anyway, inside
for
baseball.
Those of you who don't know, we specialize in bullshit.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so no. So we have a great show planned for you today, and it's going to be a bit of a lighter show, at least the first 30 minutes of it, because I don't know, the news is kind of depressing. So I guess I wanted to talk about something a little bit more, less about death and more about like just sort of
and more about a
fun
slow
stuff.
A slow, painful death that is the process of putting any president into office ever. Thank you, Brandon.
That is. No. I do feel weird, right? So, okay, let's introduce my panel first, right? So this is going to be the three of us, the old crew. My producer, Rich. Say hello, Rich.
All right. Looks like I'm unmuted and ready to go, so we should be live on all our streams. Thank everybody for joining us. Just the other day, I helped Nick Nowlin from the Takedown with Nick with the show. I just wanted to mention conversation with Dr. Curry. It's going to be a controversial conversation. I just wanted to mention it. Adair, you might catch Adair in the comments getting angry. That might be one of the things. Otherwise, make sure to like, share, subscribe here and over at the Discourse channel as well. Thank you, everyone, and give back.
Yes, and be sure to check out the SoundCloud, where we have a lot of extra content. I'm sorry for being a little bit MIA and a little bit slow with uploading new content to the SoundCloud. It's been a bit of an annoying month with both technologically and just emotionally, but we're getting back into our stride, and finishing off this threesome of black males is Adair. Say hello, Adair.
Go fuck yourself, Brandon. Thank you for joining us tonight. So we're going to start the show off really light, and then by the end of it, you're going to be really depressed and kind of where I'm at. So, I mean, if you have alcohol, I suggest starting to drink now. Might pain a little bit.
Thank you for that ringing endorsement. Although I hear that there's a Hennessy shortage, which is like insane to me.
I mean,
is North Korea stocking up? Is that what's going on? Or
I don't know. The last time I drank Hennessy, like my Republican friend in college invited me over to his dorm room to drink crunk juice and watch Star Trek Next Generation. And by the end of the night, we had agreed that he was going to ever.
That is the whitest story I've ever heard in my life.
So
y'all may as well went to play cricket and had fucking crumpets. Y'all better stop.
Richard, why don't you introduce the first topic for us, since you are the producer.
All right. I forgot for a moment what our first topic was, but now I remember that we're going to start with whether Bernie should run again. And I guess I was saying before the show, my quick summation was no, but whether we're going to get a better opportunity is going to be really the question that we're going to have to ask, whether there's going to be someone else to run that's going to be able to garner the support that's going to be necessary to be able to push out whatever establishment runner we have. But on that note, I wanted to mention a PPP poll that came out recently that showed a small majority of Republicans, a little over 54%, want Trump to be their nominee again in 2020. And when they put him up against potential Democratic nominees, Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden were finishing on top, about 12% to 14% above. And then you had Elizabeth Warren coming in at about 45 to 40, and Kamala Harris down at 39, tied at 39, and I believe Booker was right around there as well, statistically tied at about the same percentage. And what I noticed at the time was that the likelihood of them beating Trump was in the direct opposition to how much support they're probably going to get from the Democratic Party, seeing as how Cory Booker and Kamala Harris have been the two front runners, I think, of that the Democratic Party's been pushing so far. But with that, I'll give it back to our panel.
Well, yeah, I think it's an important conversation to have, right? Well, I wish we didn't have to have it, right? Because obviously it's only 2017, where we're talking about the 2020 election. And so it feels a little bit early for that conversation. But A, I wanted to have it, and B, it's actually not that early, because what we've seen so far from Democratic Party is like this sort of, the sort of soft the soft announcement that certain people are going to run with Kamala Harris, which you guys talked about, I want to say 2 weeks ago when I wasn't here, maybe 3 weeks ago at this point when I wasn't here, and people like Cory Booker, Mark Zuckerberg going on his tour of America, to prove that he's an actual real life human boy. And it's like, so people have already kind of started announcing that they're going to run for president. Similarly, I think that, the People's Party or not People's Party, I must be getting wrong, but the draft Bernie movement is submitting a petition to Bernie Sanders. Maybe they have already, to sort of commission him or conscript him into starting their own party. And so I think it's a worthwhile conversation to have. Where I'm at really is that, like, I guess Adair, you go first, because I kind of know where I'm going to be at on this one.
I'm going to be real. Like, I'm going to piss a lot of our viewers off to begin with. And the short answer to should Bernie run again? Hell the fuck no. No. Stop it. Stop. Fucking just full fucking stop. No. And here's why Bernie shouldn't run again. A, he's not going to win. We've seen this story. We've been there. We've done that. We've seen the stadiums filled. We've seen all the shit that goes on. And then we've come to realize that, guess what? The DNC does not like people that aren't centrist Democrat. Well, he is a centrist, excuse me. Don't like anybody who's not economically to the right. Bernie is literally dead center when it comes to economic policies, and maybe a little bit down, maybe a little bit libertarian when it comes to social policies, but really not by much. So, looking at Bernie as if he's some great left hope is bullshit to begin with. When he's not a leftist, folks, he's a centrist. Let's be real about what we're talking about here. We've been so inundated with the American style of politics, with American, labels that, oh my God, Bernie must be a leftist because he's so much more liberal than liberals. No, he's fucking not. He's an actual liberal is all he is. So there's that. B, I have a perspective that he's got something like several million votes in the primaries. I've got the perspective of something of that only 1,900 other people can share, and that was as someone who was literally at the DNC, who went through that hellhole, who saw what was going on. Nobody should have to be subjected to that again. So abolish the DNC, but B, no, he shouldn't run. He shouldn't. He's not going to win. There's nothing he can do to win. Even if he ran as a third party candidate, I don't think he would have enough traction to actually get the vote. What we need is somebody who's fresh, somebody who's new, somebody, and in my opinion, I'd much rather see a woman of color run with actual leftist ideation than I would see another old white dude, to be perfectly honest with you. I just don't think he should do it. It's not worth it. He's not going to win. And it's just going to make things more contentious than it already is. It's just fucking pointless. So sorry to the viewers that I pissed off, because, I mean... okay, I guess I didn't piss off as many viewers because I'm checking the live chat right now. But I mean, just realistically, it's stupid. Find somebody new. Stop it. Stop with this, because what you're doing is you're compromising. You're saying, okay, well, a real leftist can't win, so I'm going to go with Bernie, and I'm going to tie my oath to Bernie, and literally Bernie. But shut the fuck up. Bernie don't like you no more.
No. My question
is over.
My question is this, right? So, like, I kind of have the feeling that, like, at least me personally, that Bernie is kind of an albatross of the centrist mind, right? Of the Democrat. Like, I haven't really talked to a lot of like leftist people who I consider to be responsible leftists who are really that interested in Bernie Sanders, at least anymore. Like, I think there was kind of this momentum and excitement around the idea of it is going to be, that sounds kind of silly, right? To people who are, a little bit further to the right than we are. Like, I think there was a kind of excitement on the left, right? That Bernie Sanders was a real incremental change. And like that, instead of like the sort of faux incrementalism of Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders was a real incremental change towards the left that could lead to us to, to a more egalitarian society, to having a real conversation about, political economics and stuff like that. But the idea that Bernie Sanders was anything but a compromise to the sort of entrenched, leftists who had well-formed ideas, like, your DSA member or your communist, people who were on the left who had a defined ideology prior to the 2016 election, that he was anything but a compromise in that sense, I don't think is a good reading of what occurred. And so, like, from my perspective, I always felt that Bernie Sanders, in terms of at least to me, is like it demonstrates liberals and Democrats' inability to engage with politics at any other level besides, say, the personal or the label level. So you have Democrats who are focusing so heavily on Bernie Sanders, and even though essentially every week a new poll comes out that says Bernie Sanders is the most popular president, Bernie Sanders is the most popular politician in America, people don't seem to look deeper about his actual policies. The Democrats are just kind of hyper focusing on that.
Can we actually talk about that real quick? Because I do want to.
Sure.
Because I do want to get in on that. His deeper policies. One of the things that really pissed me off about Bernie Sanders, and one of the things that really pushed me from saying, "All right, yeah, you know what? Let me be clear. If he ran in 2020 and there was nobody better, I would vote for him. I don't like voting for capitalists. Does anything to help anybody, but that's beside the point." Bernie was one of the senators that signed a letter that basically said to the UN, you can't put sanctions on Israel. Israel's not doing anything wrong. Israel's an apartheid state practicing genocide.
Let me clarify real quick. It wasn't the UN was not going to sanction Israel. The UN sent a strongly worded letter to Israel about their neo-apartheid state, in which they restrict Palestinians' access to water, access to basic necessities. They control their entire economy. They build illegal settlements. The UN, in typical UN fashion, wagged their finger at Israel, to cajole them. And the response of Israel's, I guess, big brother, United States of America, was to have every senator essentially sign a letter to the UN saying, how dare you pick on Israel when there are so many worse states out there. It's but please finish your thought.
But no, I mean, that's, at least for me, that right there was Bernie Sanders saying, I am the traditional American politician. That is because I mean, it's the same kind of thing, because now we're seeing the bills that are saying they want to criminalize the BDS movement, which was something that worked so incredibly effectively when we talk about apartheid South Africa. These are tools in which we can affect change, especially those of us who happen to be outside of a particular country, who happen to be against what's going on. Bernie Sanders basically saying, you know what, Israel is okay. It's okay for Israel to build these illegal settlements. It's okay for Israel to hold people in prison indefinitely for no actual crimes. That kind of shows you're not actually a leftist. That's some authoritarian imperialist bullshit right there. And so for me, that's a hard line. That is a hard line in the sand.
I do want to give Bernie Sanders some credit, right? And so, did he spark a revolution? I guess, right? I think that largely he was the catalyst for some people who were largely politically inactive, who didn't have a really coherent political ideology. They just recognized there were problems with the way America worked, and the government was essentially not doing anything about it. He was a very good, for lack of a better term, gateway drug into politics for a lot of people. But ultimately, I think it's time for someone else to adopt his position. As again, he said that the movement's not about him, right? But unfortunately, the way the social political culture of America is just dominated by big men theories of politics. Right? Okay, well, we have to have a leader. We have to have some a person to coalesce around. And in terms of president, we do actually have to have someone to vote for. But should that person be Bernie in 2020? I don't think so, right? At the same time, I think I agree with Richard, and I'll let Richard get in here too, in that I don't think there's going to be anyone else in 2020 who can actually fill that role. I don't think there's going to be anyone else who could fill that role in a way that I view to be sufficient. I'm not a big fan of Tulsi Gabbard for a variety of reasons.
I agree.
I'm not a big fan of Keith Ellison, although I think I would prefer Keith Ellison over Bernie Sanders at this point. But I think that generally we need to see a shift away from talking about Bernie Sanders as though he's the great savior of America, and also as though he is the actual true representative of America's left, because he's not the true representative of America's left.
Adair Schmidt, 2028. I'm coming for that fucking toothbrush.
Are you old enough to run in 2028?
I'm old enough to run in 2028. I will be 36, and I'm coming for that fucking toothbrush. That is my campaign slogan.
Anyway, Richard, but like you go ahead.
I guess like I kind of opened with it, and I suggest I more or less agree with what Adair was saying. Perhaps a few less expletives, but
there can only be one of us that swears every other word on the show, and that's me.
Yeah, I feel like you're hogging it, and so whatever. We'll leave that where it is now. But as far as with Bernie, no, he shouldn't be running, but I'm afraid that that's where we're going to be at, because if he's not going to run, what we need to be doing is we already need to be well on our way to registering millions of new voters. That's one way that you get in, that you don't have to get saddled with Bernie as the best option left on the table. Like if we're not registering, and it should be happening now in preparation for 2018 and as well as for 2020. But and we're not talking about a few tens of thousands. We're talking about millions of people need to be getting registered right now. And there's other actions that need to be taken. And you do see it, some of them on the local level and at various parts where you could see somebody else rise and have enough core support spread across individual precincts and individual people that you could have some sort of thing. But I mean, Bernie's already well situated, and Adair skeptical of the idea that he's going to overcome the Democratic establishment machine. Trying to have somebody that isn't as well situated in the national awareness and already the most popular politician in the country try to overcome that machine seems insurmountable to me, for one. I mean, Nina Turner is one of the better options, I think, on the table at the moment, but I don't know about the depth of her knowledge regarding foreign affairs and so on and so forth. But Trump's shown that you can be at the bottom of the barrel and still not mess things up to the point where we're at a nuclear warfare right away. So,
I mean, I do think that I disagree with Adair on that. I think that Bernie Sanders could clinch the nomination for Democratic Party in 2020. Like I think
the Electoral College, the fact that they make it cost obscene amounts of money to run a campaign. I mean,
well,
sure,
are you conceding 2020? That's my question, Adair. Are you conceding 2020 today?
I think if we had a better politician who could win through the current two-party duopoly, I think we'd have a real shot. But the fact of the matter is, I can guarantee you this one thing: Democrats and Republicans agree on a lot. But when it comes to things like running for president, I guarantee you they're going to unite to stop any legitimate third-party challenger they see. And that's the issue that I'm foreseeing here, because that's the problem with American politics right now, is because we have corporations are considered people. Corporations are allowed
do you see Bernie Sanders as representing outside of the two-party? Would he represent outside? So
I do think I see him as representing outside of the two-party system, just because that's where he spent his entire life. But to run an insurgency campaign, he already tried to run an insurgency campaign. He tried to do it through the duopoly, and we saw what happened when he was crushed there. I think he would get.
My question would be, what grounds do you think somebody else could be more successful? But go ahead, Brandon.
But the thing is, what I would say, right? I don't think that. I think he could clinch the nomination in 2020 from the Democratic Party. I think that he could make a legitimate claim for the Democratic Party nomination through the primary system, assuming Clinton doesn't run again, which I think would be just I couldn't deal with it personally, but I think that he could make a legitimate run for the Democratic Party nomination. I think that he could, if he became Democratic Party nominee, I think that he could beat Trump. Of course he could. I think Joe Biden could beat Trump. I think Martin O'Malley could probably beat Trump. I think Kamala Harris could beat Trump. I think Cory Booker could beat Trump. I think in 2020, the ability to beat Trump is not, for president is not going to be that difficult, because I mean, let's be honest, Hillary Clinton only lost by a few 1,000 votes, very small margin that could have been overcome with just proper canvassing and proper campaign strategy. My issue with that is that a lot of Bernie Sanders kind of image as this radical leftist is a result of liberal fear mongering and the sort of them painting him as though he's the farthest anyone and anyone, any politician in America could ever get, right? And so their rejection of Bernie Sanders, as this outsider, this created the sort of bedrock of his. Gave lended legitimacy to his sort of critique of the system in a way, even as he wasn't actually critiquing the system as harshly as he should have. In 2020, I don't think he'd be an insurgent campaign. I think that he could, he would just be another dim running for president. An FDR Democrat, but he would just.
The issue, though. Like, look at the large urban centers. Look at the areas. Like, so he would not win Seattle, for example.
He wouldn't win Seattle.
I don't think. No, but here's why I say, because if you're going to win certain states, the Dems reliably win each of the coast. Win the coast, right? They win the Northeast. They win the West Coast. He's not going to be able to win Washington State. He's just not going to. He would probably split it. But opening that, and that's going to be the argument.
Saying he wouldn't win Washington State as the Democratic nominee or as a third party.
If he was running, if it was three people running in the race, and this is the reason why I say he wouldn't win Washington State. Washington State, as much as I hate the Democratic Party, has an impressively big machine here in Washington State. And when you look at how people voted, sure, Bernie just demolished Clinton in our caucuses, where you must physically show up to at least drop your ballot off. But he was destroyed in the primary, which is an exclusively vote by mail system. Washington State's general elections are all done vote by mail. The Democrats have the machine, and I don't think that Bernie's campaign learned enough from last year when they did not have the ground game that they should have, especially on the West Coast, in particular in California. That I don't see it overcoming that. So I don't see him winning Washington State. I don't see him winning California. I think he could win Oregon because they're less organized there, and so he has a better chance of winning the insurgency there. I don't see him winning New York. I don't see him winning any of these big Democrat, quote-unquote, liberal strongholds, even though the majority of the people there absolutely agree with him. The problem is the system is not set up in a way that a third-party candidate can actually do something right now. We have to reform the system. He's going to be more popular, but
you can't reform the system with the people with the power to reform it being the people that benefit from it. So.
I agree.
Right, that's part of the issue that we're facing. Like that is why this becomes a circular conversation. But the fact of the matter is, we have to look at it like this: take into account the Electoral College. If it was just the popular vote, Bernie Sanders would win in a goddamn fucking landslide. But because the Electoral College is a thing, it's set up to stop him from winning.
Primary, right? We're talking primary, right? Correct. If he would run,
we're talking general election. We're talking general election. We're talking him running as a third party.
Okay, as a third party, yeah. Oh no, I don't think that Bernie Sanders could win the general election as a third party candidate. I don't think that's a possibility. I think that at the same time, though, I do think that there is some. It's hard, right? I feel like we're stuck in this kind of cycle, right? Where it's impossible, where Democratic Party and Republican Party have created a scenario where it's impossible to ever kind of leverage yourself out of the two-party system unless you're willing to cede at least, 10, 20 years worth of elections to the party who least agrees with you, which is, like they've created a system that sees us in perpetual crisis. And, again, like I say all the time, Democratic Party's brand viability, we're talking about the Dems right now, relies on the United States of America being in a state of perpetual proto-fascist, proto-barbarism. It's like, hey, you know what? We can never move away from, the Dem position of centrist bullshit towards a leftist position of guaranteed services, guaranteed rights, guaranteed protections, because we're so busy playing defensive. And, we can't talk about single payer healthcare because Obamacare is in danger. We can't talk about, universal pre-K because Trump is going to have us all being hunted in hedge mazes by robots. It's like we can never have conversations about long-term goals and solutions because we have short-term apocalypses in it, which there is some validity to that. Like, Trump is a goddamn nightmare, but at a certain point, I mean, could Bernie Sanders, like, theoretically, if we were willing to say, okay, 2020 is a wash, Kamala Harris is going to lose to Trump, or Ted Cruz, or Pence, if Trump resigns, doesn't run again, which is a possibility, because no one likes Kamala Harris except the Democratic establishment. No one likes Cory Booker, the Democratic Party establishment. Al Franken could probably win. Whatever. Are we willing to sort of see that position and get a third party, whether it be a Bernie party or a Green Party or, I don't know, People's Party or a Democratic Socialist Party, if the DSA transitions from a group to a political party?
But
are we willing to
Socialist Party? That's socialist alternative. I don't think they're going to run a presidential candidate, though.
Yeah, of course. But would you be willing to sort of lay the groundwork and lose to essentially the Republicans are a terrorist / fascist / white supremacist party with good branding and good messaging, decent branding. Like, would be willing to cede control of our government at the national level, with all that implies, in order to sort of lay the groundwork for 30 years in the future, having a multi-party political system. That's such a hard decision to have to make.
I really don't think so. I really don't think that's a difficult decision, because it comes down to a question of what is morally correct. And I think that in order for us to have to get anything done that is morally correct and is good for the people of this country, you have to have a third party running. You have to have a party that's willing to go in there and lose elections to set that groundwork. And I think you're starting to see some of that pop up. I like DSA. Don't get me wrong. I don't agree with them in that they just try to push Democrats further to the left. That's not something I'm a big fan of, but I like what DSA is doing. I like that they're getting people involved. I like that they're making socialists no longer a dirty word in American politics. Those are all really good things. So we're starting to see some of that groundwork. We're also starting to see some of that groundwork in the fact that we have a generational shift occurring. Again, millennials are in favor of socialism. We have a favorable view of it. We think it's a good thing. Why? Because it's a more moral system. It takes better care of the people in the country. So as we start to see, and this is going to sound morbid as hell, but I really don't care, as we start to see baby boomers die off in huge numbers, and we start to see millennials take the status of the dominant group, and we start seeing more actual millennials run with the same idea, saying, hey, you know what, man, we're the generation of college debt. We're the generation that for almost the entirety of our lives, actually I think the entirety of our lives, we've never seen our country at peace. We're the generation of the 2008 financial collapse. We have seen the ills of late stage capitalism, and we need to move beyond it.
You know what's amazing? I've read a poll. I can't remember where it was at, but apparently Lenin is polling better amongst millennials than Trump, which is amazing. which is amazing, right? It's great. It's magnificent. It's arousing, and I agree with you, right? So
Arousing.
But I guess I'm not gonna bury my own personal bias. Like, I am a fan of Bernie Sanders. There's something about him, his earnestness, right? It reminds me of the old saying, like, Bernie Sanders doesn't speak. He doesn't spit fire. He just speaks the truth, and people don't know the difference. And and that's the case, right? His 2016 campaign was let down by poor decisions that I have to attribute to his staff. In terms of in terms of certain messaging, but I like Bernie Sanders. I like him despite his problematic policies, largely because he represented like the first attack on the establishment that I saw in my lifetime. That being said, the idea that there is not a cult of personality surrounding Bernie Sanders by people who just have collapsed all anti-establishment feeling into him is wrong-headed, because there is, and I think that there does need to be contention with that narrative that Bernie Sanders is the only option we have for 2020, because I think at that point we're talking about the narrative surrounding Bernie Sanders becoming the exact one that led to Hillary Clinton being foisted upon us. I said foisted upon us, which was that, he has the most name recognition. He has the most, he has the, it's his turn now. It's X, Y, and Z, which is, again, when it comes to like Bernie, I think that's appealing. But that general idea that politics is an issue of like, well, whose turn is it? Who has the it's a popularity contest where not only are you trying to decide who you like the most, but I think David Graeber wrote, politics in America is a very kind of weird popularity contest, a really kind of weird beauty pageant, where not only do you have to decide who you like the most, but you have to decide who everyone else likes the most. And it's like, to me, it's like, I think that we should be having a larger conversation about like, well, what does it look like to have a multi-generational movement, and where is the leftist bench? Like where is that bench? Who is running in 2024? Let's say Bernie runs in 2020. He's going to be too old in 2024. I think he'll be literally 10,000 years old. Who's going to run in 2024? Who's going to pick up that torch? Nina Turner? Okay, that's a good. Who's after her? Like where are we going with this? We have to stop just sort of engaging in incredibly shallow politics.
We need to be setting longer term goals and then holding ourselves accountable for where we end up in relation to them. And we haven't been doing that either nationally, individually, I think, or nationally or as a party. And I think people are starting to do it individually, and that's why you're seeing some big shifts in the political landscape as it is. But I think what it's going to take is massive engagement. I mean, what it's going to take is engaging a lot of the people that haven't been engaged before. Those are because a lot of the establishment folks are going to go wherever the establishment lays. And so whether we're talking 2020 or 2024 or 2028, if it's going to be a third party, which it seems is the most realistic if you're going to actually get any changes from the Democratic Party. I joked earlier that it seems easier, because every time the Democratic Party does something bad, Ray, the letter that Andrew Saturn circulated that looked like a collections letter, the immediate response is, well, Republicans are worse. I feel like we'd be better off trying to fix the Republican Party if we wanted Democrats to get better, because then they wouldn't have that excuse and they'd be out of outs.
The Republican Party is beyond repair. I'm of the opinion the Republican Party has been allowed to become a monster by the Democratic Party in order to justify the Democratic Party's just bullshit. The Republican Party is I don't often provide cogent criticism of them because they're a bunch of ghouls. It's they delight in their leadership is avowed white supremacists.
Real quick before we get off on that tangent, I actually want to get some audience participation in this.
Oh yeah, go ahead, please.
So first, this is actually somebody I know, so I'm just going to go ahead and make this real quick. Jose Machado said, "What about Rand Paul?" No, go fuck yourself. No, we don't take ANCAPs. Go fuck yourself. Brandon. Go. If you're gonna come on this show and you're gonna suggest that actual capitalists, go fuck yourself.
No.
That's completely antithetical. But we have one other question. We have an actual question this time, one that we can actually talk about. This one is from Jay Smith. He says, "Hey guys, the presidential elections are a big deal for sure, but what do you think of all the progressive movements like Justice Democrats and Brand New Congress?" Justice Democrats follows me on Twitter. I haven't really seen much from them, so I really don't have an opinion.
Let's go.
I also haven't seen shit from Brand New Congress, so
let's go. Let's go piece by piece, right? So, why not Rand Paul? I think the question of Rand Paul and Ron Paul are important questions because they're ANCAPs. Yeah, but
they are the butt of every joke.
It's their policies are just close enough, or on the surface level, to be dangerous, right? Because
there's no fucking way they're close.
No. Because if you're only barely paying attention, you'll say, oh, well, they're anti-war, and they're anti-corporate tax breaks, and they want to they are down with legalizing marijuana.
I'm pretty sure they're actually very pro corporate tax breaks, very. No, I'm sorry.
I misspoke. They're anti-corporate bailouts. Is what I mean. It's they mirror some of the rhetoric, or rather, they mirror some of the, I don't know what you call it, the policy goals, right? So this is the same conversation we had, why we don't team up with the alt-right, even though they're also kind of against the same thing we're against. They mirror some of the same grievances, but their the Rand Pauls, whether he's named after Rand.
Can we just put it simply?
No. We don't.
We're opposite ends of the economic spectrum.
Yeah, but I think it's a little bit important, right? So, Rand Paul, whether he's named after Ayn Rand or Rand McNally, is. You
just wanted to make a shitty joke.
Yeah, I did. But they're just close enough to be dangerous. I like that joke. It's a good joke. I mean, Ayn Rand writes pornography. Joke. Ayn Rand writes pornography for sociopaths. It's fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. No, that's just the truth. That's not a joke. Fountainhead is pornography. Who's John goes pornography for sociopaths? Read it. I swear to you, read it. Anyway, but no. So they're just close enough to be dangerous and to distract from the fact that if you're engaging in a shallow grievance-based politics, the idea just because we have the same grievance does not mean we have the same ideology, right? So they're against corporate bailouts, but they also want to make sure we live in a corporate fiefdom. They're against legalized marijuana, but they're also in favor of private prisons. It's they have they have some of the same grievances, but the ideological basis for those grievances is so far removed. Like Adair said, it's so the opposite of ours that like engaging with them is not worthwhile because we should start, at least start at the ground, laying the groundwork for forming a coherent leftist ideology by which solutions and problems can be framed around. But
So
I would just say briefly that some people, their ideology is very superficially based, and sometimes it's just about those rallying issues about what, and the underlying explanations or solutions aren't part of why they're a part of it, or could be modified if they were presented. So I wouldn't abandon any conversation, but if somebody's an entrenched ideologue I mean, if you're going to want to try and run a third party, you're going to need all the votes you can get, Adair. All right.
I don't need to capitulate to dumbasses.
I don't believe in grievance. I don't believe in grievance-based politics, though. So go ahead.
Well, no, you don't have to base it off the grievance, but I'm just saying that you like that.
But no, that basis right there is problematic.
There are tens of millions of voters, and what are you going to do with them? Are you going to beat them, convince them not to vote, or outvote them?
You gonna come to me. You got two choices, America. You either gonna get down or you gonna lay down. This is not a choice.
No. I mean, like,
see, that worked great for the Democrats. But go ahead.
Essentially, Adair is right though. Despite being unnecessarily aggressive, like all black males,
which you would see on that Dr. Curry video from Nick. But anyway.
I do have a larger point real quick. And this is simple. So when we talk, let's talk about the actual ideology where the Rand Pauls and the Ron Pauls fall. So most of you do know about the political ideology chart as 4 quadrants, up and down. So your y-axis is the farther up you go, the more authoritarian. The further down you go, the more anarchist. To the left is economics. To the right is is communism. To the right is capitalism. They fall on that bottom right quadrant.
And the z-axis is like
shut the fuck up.
How hoish you are.
Shut up.
Are you an ANCAP thought, or are you
Anyways,
or are you a radical left, a radical communist prude?
Oh my god!
Or sorry, a radical communist incel.
Anyways, here's part of the problem with that. So when we talk about ANCAPs, one of the things that they are in favor of is they want to keep capitalism. They actually want to shove capitalism to its furthest extreme and simultaneously remove any and all checks on said capitalism. They want to completely and utterly because they want to remove the state. And that's how they remove checks on that capitalism, is they remove the state. So they are different from fascists in the fact that they do agree with us on things like civil liberties. They do agree with us on things like, legalizing marijuana, things like that. Part of the problem is these are also people that will argue that children need to be allowed to work in brothels. That is something that people from this political ideology regularly argue. That is a problem. That is not somebody we need to work with.
I say that because ANCAPs want to replace the state with private corporations. It's like
that is something else.
Like, yeah. They essentially, it's like the issue with ANCAPs is like, okay, so like you would say ANCAPs don't want the FAA to be able to the TSA to be able to pat your crotch down at the airport, but they do want to give that power to Delta. It's right. like it's essentially just that. They want to replace the state with private corporations. And of course we're gonna have 100,000 ANCAPs. Like, no, that's not what it is. Again, it's pretty much just that. Like, I mean, I'm not gonna argue about ANCAPs.
And so that is, again, it's completely antithetical to what we want to do. Whereas a lot of us are saying, you know what, I don't really like the state. I don't care for the state, but the state is necessary and it's useful in certain things. It's useful in protecting the public health. It's useful in things like maintaining, and it'll be useful in things like, so if we can get an equitable education system, the state is the way to go with that. So a lot of us, even though we fall largely on those libertarian guidelines, where we say, hey, you know what, I don't want the state intervening in what I can do with my body, with my choices, things like that. We do say, hey, you know what, we want you in the, like, instead of TSA patting me down, we want you to be going down and patting down Delta. We want the opposite thereof. We want state competition. In a lot of cases, we want state ownership. That's something else that we would like to see. So we're fundamentally different. To answer Richard's question, though, about, well, what are you going to do if, to get voters out there? Y'all going to come to me. Like, y'all think I'm playing when I say you can either get down or you going to lay down. I'm going to tell you what you're going to get, and either you like it and you vote for me, or you don't like it and other people vote for me. I win and you get it anyway.
Talk about domination politics. Which is the whole conversation I had.
Here are my politics. Here's what I'm offering you, and enough people are going to like what I'm offering that I'm going to win. So even if you don't like it, you still gonna reap the benefits. So you're gonna get down, or you're gonna lay down.
I agree with Adair, right? So the whole thing, I mean, just not the way I was phrased because it was a bit weird, but no. So like the whole idea that we have to, it's more expedient to align yourself or to form coalitions with people who already have an entrenched ideology. And the grievances of that ideology mirror some of the grievances of my ideology, as opposed to, say, trying to activate the non-voter or in some way deal with the huge problem of disenfranchisement in America, right? So, like, as opposed to we align with the alt-right or the ANCAPs or the libertarians, as opposed to, say, I don't know, getting automatic voter registration passed in all 50 states. That we get rid of felon disenfranchisement. That we take care of all of the the hundreds of thousands of African American voters around America who have had their had their voting restricted in some way based on either arbitrary voter ID laws or any sort of other legislation that does that. Is a bit ridiculous, right? It's the exact same kind of argument that we see when people talk about. I think there was a new poll in Newsweek, because one of these new polls about why did Hillary Clinton lose the election comes out at least once a week, right? That said, it was actually Bernie Sanders' fault. Here's how we can prove it. And it's like, but pointing to the people who didn't vote for Hillary Clinton and voted for a third party, or who she as opposed to, say, pointing to the millions, tens of millions of people who either could not vote or did not vote despite being eligible, it's the definition of punching down, right? Because the question is now was not, hey, well, why couldn't people vote? The question was, all right, why didn't they vote at all? Why are they so disengaged? Why did the people who decided to vote? Why did the activated voters decide to vote for a third party? And I think that at a certain point, Adair is right. We have to stop accepting the idea of that we have to have of like a 50% of our voter population or more is simply not going to vote. We have to start engaging with, okay, well, how do we make 50% of our people who stay home? How do we actually get them to the polls? How do we get them to the voting booth? I do want to transition to the brand new Congress question, and I mean the answer to that I think that there needs to be less focus on the federal government overall. Right, I think that one of the things that we do at the Discourse is actually interview local politicians, going from city council person. I'm going to be interviewing Jabari Brisport, a city council person for the 34th district of New York City, as soon as we get off here, and mayor and superintendent, because that's actually important as well, right? In certain ways, like activating people at the local level and showing them how impactful your city council can be, how impactful your mayor can be, how impactful, your state senator can be, is key to mobilizing people at the macro level, and not allowing them to succumb to just voter apathy and voter disenchantment. But go ahead, Richard. I know you had something to say.
Oh, I think it's gonna I wanted to clarify quickly that what I was saying is that there's people with very surface level adherence to various ideologies and focus that, I agree with your criticism of not wanting to have a grievance-based politics, but just that there are people that may glom on to someone like a Rand Paul or something like that without really understanding the nuances that you laid out and you and Adair mentioned about the actual underlying beliefs, and that when explained, a socialist solution would be receptive to that solution as well, to resolving the same grievance. But that's not going to happen with people that are entrenched in there. On that point, I would agree not to waste the time. I did want to mention also that it's really about engagement, and like you mentioned, and you and Adair both mentioned, getting the 50 or so % of people that aren't regularly engaged, especially at the midterm election level or in the local elections that happen in off years and off months and random times throughout the year. That level of engagement has to come up, and part of that is getting the people that you went to caucuses with or went to meetings with during the election time and meeting with them and supporting them and being there when they're running for their local offices and helping, as Brandon said, to show the importance of the local office. Go ahead.
I mean, I think that, helping with local offices all comes down to a larger goal of not letting people, or rather not giving people a legitimate reason to disconnect politics from material reality, right? I think a big problem that we have in American society is that most people, when it comes to talking about politics, when it comes to, thinking about politics or conceptualizing, politics and policy, like they just don't see the direct impact on, who I vote for president and the material realities that I live. Because, and I think this is a good time to transition to talking about Afghanistan and Trump's sort of, call for perpetual warfare, despite criticizing the Afghanistan war for, at least since 2013, prior to becoming president, and also even up until the primary debates. The idea that, we were at war for 16 years in Afghanistan is going to continue, like two different presidents. I mean, sorry, we've been at war in the Middle East, well, at least Afghanistan, I'm not mistaken, like since even before Bush.
2001.
2001
was the official start of the Iraq-Afghanistan war. I think that's when we invaded Iraq. We were in Desert Storm and the Gulf War before that, and that was early 90s, because that started around the time I was born with Bush Sr., and then that continued on through Clinton.
Well, and our role in Afghanistan goes long, like back to arming. Yeah.
Well, we include CIA involvement. It goes.
Yeah. We can be involved in warfare in the Middle East and specifically Afghanistan since the 80s, and so like the idea, like you could reasonably say, right, that despite various escalations, regardless of what party has been in charge, as it relates to Afghanistan and the Middle East, we've seen really no sort of change in the opposite direction, just escalation after escalation after escalation. But sorry, so let's transition to Afghanistan. And
we're going to have to keep it brief because I think we are going to be running out. Yep. Okay.
I thought we got an hour. We're going for an hour and a half. Yeah, so we've got a little while.
Well, we're going to push the transition from being live.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. Sorry, folks.
Yeah, so one more reason to remind folks about the SoundCloud. Make sure that go check that out and to catch the extended shows and some also, as Brandon mentioned, some extra stuff that he does on the side. So,
if you guys follow me on Twitter, I'm going to tweet out a really great episode here as soon as we're done. So y'all might want to go ahead and do that.
I'm of the opinion that like Trump transitioned to talking about keeping up war in Afghanistan, like as he's done, to distract from how awful his response was to Charlottesville, right? And I think that the first part of that was like his pivot to Confederate statues. Like, okay, so like Trump shit the bed when it came to his inability to openly condemn Nazis, which was hilarious to watch, but frightening to real implications of. That he just had to come up with false equivalencies. He had to do all this stuff, and to pivot to, despite that being a colossal failure, pivoting to Afghanistan, pivoting to Confederate statues is the appropriate way to feed his racist base. But can you like just lay out the Afghanistan thing for us there real quick before we transition?
So, 3 points to his strategy, and I'm just gonna fucking paraphrase because fuck this shit. It's a bunch of bullshit wrapped in patriotism, wrapped in imperialism, and just he can go shove it up his ass. So, point number one. The first part of his strategy is finding a way that quote honors American soldiers, not the people of Iraq, not the people that we've gone in and killed over 1 million of over the past, the duration of this war, not the people whose lives have been destabilized, cultures ripped from them. I mean, like literally, we go in and we fuck up the entire region. But our first priority needs to be honoring Americans. So go fuck yourself, Donald Trump. For that matter, go fuck imperialism. Anyway, his second point of his arm of his strategy is we can't pull out quickly because it'll cause another 9/11. Like that's it. That's what that second point is. And his third and last point is Pakistan. And again, I shit you not, Pakistan talks about the region, and it is literally that's why he says Pakistan harbors terrorists. And he also mentions India a couple of times. So that's what Donald Trump's strategy is for the Middle East. So, perpetual warfare it is, because this makes people money. And, be damned the millions and millions of lives that it's cost. Be damned the fact that it does nothing to actually stop up where they're fighting for. Be damned everybody that isn't rich and making money off this. So, yeah.
I mean, America has done nothing in the Middle East but create its own problems or perpetuate its own problems, right? America created the Taliban, America created ISIS, America created all of these groups that we're now being forced to fight through a variety of means, whether it be arming them or like bombing their children. And now we find ourselves in this position where, by nature of the fact that every president since, let's say, by nature of, like, this being a bipartisan effort to escalate warfare in the Middle East, whether it's been done because of racism or done just silent with the silent approval of the Democratic Party because, whatever, they're also in the dole of military-industrial complex. It's just when Trump does it, it becomes even more frightening because we see the sharp, we see the fecklessness of the Democratic Party as it relates to to perpetual warfare. We see exactly how that American exceptionalist narrative, that desire for imperialism, just it defines both parties. Permeates both parties, right? It defines both parties and what they believe and what they do, to the point where it gets like Donald Trump is a guy who people didn't trust him to not stare up at the sun for good reason during the eclipse. But when he comes to escalating warfare in a sovereign nation, that gets met with just silent nods of approval from both Democratic Party and the mainstream media, the corporate media.
Yeah, we know that's why he turned towards it, at least in part, after he shit the bed, because he knew it would at least give people something to quiet them down on the left and among other folks. Because last time he went and bombed Syria, it got round of applause, and Brian Williams got a little erection on set or whatever, and we had that issue.
but this thing, right? I think that. So I'm of two minds after it. I guess we'll end with what I say, or rather we'll transition with what I say, or rather I'll just say something real quick. Fuck it, I'll let me say it, right? I'm of two minds, right? One, it's frightening to me that Democratic Party, as their vehicle for criticizing Trump, sort of fall back on this idea that he's incompetent constantly. They think, oh, Trump is incompetent. He's this singular incompetent force. Do you trust him with his finger on the button? No, I don't, right? Obviously. Like, he's incompetent, as opposed to being able to lob an effectual critique of the fact that he's actually doing evil shit, right? Because the most evil shit he's doing is essentially things that they have bipartisanship approval of, like, perpetuating, humanitarian crises in Yemen, right? Which was an awful article in the New York Times that asked, like, how could what's happening in Yemen go on when Saudi Arabia and the U.S. have their eye on them? It's like, I think you answered your own question, right? It's like, that seems like that's exactly why.
Yeah.
But the Democratic Party seems like the Democratic Party has hamstrung themselves with years of being corporatist, years of being neoconservative, years of sort of rolling over on more complex issues of combating white supremacy through, real social and material changes, to the point where when it comes to actually criticizing Trump and the evil shit he does, they kind of can only rely on the low-hanging fruit. Like, the Muslim ban is awful. Of course, I can't pretend they're just distractions, because they're not distractions. They have actual consequences in lives. But like, the Muslim ban is awful. But it's also the result of decades of bombing these countries and the perpetuation of a cultural notion that these countries are dangerous inherently. The transgender ban is goddamn draconian, awful, and no one wants it. And it's just mean-spirited and craven. But let's be honest, both parties have not actually constructed a coherent narrative in support of transgender people, right? We had
they both want the fights more than they want the issues to resolve the way they claim they want them to resolve. The best example being healthcare with the Republicans. It's like they didn't want to actually do anything to healthcare. What they wanted to do was fight about it. And as soon as they had to stop fighting it, like that's why they're still fighting, even though they're only fighting amongst themselves at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I was gonna say more. I was gonna point to Chelsea Manning and how both, representatives from both parties, whether it be Kamala Harris or or just like your general Democratic aligned punditry, still like to dead name her, still like to make subtle jabs about subtle but trans misogynist jabs about her. It's just like and ultimately combating these issues means cutting them off at the foundation.
But that means that would mean that the United States has to actually take an interest in these issues, right? And so I'm of a particular mind, especially when it comes to things like the transgender ban in the military. Is it's othering trans people, period, is wrong, right? And that's one of the things. That's my critique from the left. And that's my critique of other people on the left. This idea that we can just continue to other trans folks like that's something that's acceptable. No, it's not acceptable. Imperialism is also shit. Like, don't get me wrong. But we cannot go about, making these jokes about people like George Takei, who is a centrist liberal fuck, who's like, hey, no, transgenders, saying transgenders deserve the right to bomb innocent brown people too, and then put George Takei's name underneath it. I mean, yes, that's what he's arguing, but also we just can't other trans people. We have to stop doing that. That's something that we have to be better about.
Well, let's transition to the better half of the show, and I do mean the better half. It is a much more coherent show now. We don't have to deal with the sort of issues of recording live. So I remind you to head over to
fuck a lot more. Like we say fuck a lot more.
If you can believe
I'll remind you to head over to the SoundCloud to subscribe there and get our extra content in audio podcast form. We will be on iTunes eventually. I promise you. We're on Stitcher. We have a sound. That's basically it. So you can listen to us on your favorite podcast player, your phone, all that other shit. If you can become a patron, please do. Richard, take us out. Thank you.
All right.
Follow me on Twitter for this latest podcast that Brandon took 3 weeks getting up. Brandon still sucks.